Hello, YouTube. So I've been planning on making this video, and finally stopped putting it off and actually going to do it. Now this is my first video that I've ever done, so it's going to be a little rough, a little scuffed. Let's see how it goes. I may even cut this part out. We'll see. So hello, welcome. So who am I? Some random dude. Actually, I kind of am just a random dude. I started streaming only a few months ago, but I've been playing War Thunder for about 2 years. Not like seriously playing. You know, I play periodically. I'm not like I'm not even in like the content creator program or anything like that. Just play for fun. But I'm making the video that you're watching right now because when I started getting into helicopters and jets and their more complex systems, I found that there was no resource for what are the controls. How do you set up your controls for a console? So I'm not an expert. The schemes and options and everything like that I'm going to be presenting are not perfect. It works for me. Feel free to edit and change to find out what works best for you. Because even I made some changes that feel better for me from the control schemes that I originally am basing this on. I'm on Xbox Series X specifically, but I do believe that the controls and everything like that we're talking about here will translate to PlayStation and maybe even to PC too. I use controller and a keyboard that I've plugged into my Xbox. To my understanding, most USB keyboards, even some wireless ones, will work. The ones I currently have are Logitech, a wired one for the computer I'm using right now, or the Xbox I'm using for streaming right now. But I do have a wireless one hooked up to another Xbox. Yeah, so I'm really new to this. I've only started streaming in May, but I really could not find a video or an article that explained the things I'm going to explain about. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera and let's get into it. So the first thing I want to do is we're going to go over some options. I'm going to explain a few of the options that I remember that are not default. There we go. I leave most of my options, most of everything at default, but there's a couple of things that I've learned to update and change that feel good for me and that I've learned through other videos to adjust. So actually we're going to start at common battle settings. The ones I changed are camera shake and sense of flight. These ones will provide a less shaky experience, especially when you're in the first person cockpit, right? So if you're playing sim, your head won't move around like you're a pilot sitting in the airplane. You actually are a little more video gaming. You sit, you're very much more steady. It's cool to have the sense of flight on, but it can be very wobbly when you're trying to be precise with your shots or your bomb drops. Camera shake is just that. Anytime that you do something that shakes your camera, I turn it down. I don't like to have a lot of shakiness in my camera. I don't like it to go completely away, so I have it at 10. Sense of flight, completely 0. Automatic join squads, leave that at yes. If you actually do like joining a squad, if you don't want to be put in a squad with anybody, turn that off. No big deal. Join already active battles. This is pretty commonly turned off. This means that when you join a match, everybody else will be joining at the same time. If you don't mind arriving late, go ahead and turn it on. Helicopter matches are pretty good to leave this on because they're much more rare nowadays than aircraft battles, airplane battles. I want to touch on a couple of air battle settings. So let's get over to air battles. A few things here that I've set for my own quality of life. The aircraft parameters HUD, I've turned this off of the default white, since the default white can get lost in the clouds. Gun targeting distance. This is something you're going to see in a lot of videos. Gun targeting and vertical targeting basically sets where your guns cross each other. So in an instance of a World War II plane, this is the distance where the guns on the wings will cross each other. Or in an airplane with a single gun, like an A-10 or the Corsair you see in the background, or the new modern F-16s and F-15s, they've only got one gun. But this is the distance where those bullets are going to cross that crosshair. Set it something comfortable. I have mine at 600. 800 would be fine. I wouldn't put it any lower than 400. Vertical targeting basically does the same thing, but for a vertical distance. If you turn that off, if you have different gun ballistics, they may drop differently versus other guns on an airplane, especially a World War II airplane where you might have cannons and machine guns that will drop at different distances or be placed at different points on the airplane. This will adjust for that automatically. Bomb fuse, if you're doing low-level bombing, you want to set this up to 1 or 2 seconds or somewhere in there. This is the distance or the time from when a bomb lands on the ground till it explodes. I've never really figured out what a salt fuse is. It has something to do with height above the ground or something. Haven't really messed around with it. 1 or 2 seconds I found is really, really easy to use. Countermeasure intervals, this is for when you're using periodic countermeasure drops on an airplane that has lots of countermeasures. You can set this up and see how quickly you can expend your ammunition without having to push the button. I put it at 2 seconds. This is a pretty good measure of time between each pop of countermeasures. 5 or 10 seconds is a pretty long distance. But whatever works for you. Again, this is all to personal taste. Countermeasure series, I only like to do 1 at a time. I'm not going to pop off 4 at a time. You can if you want, by all means. Let me see, a couple of more to touch on. Rectangular radar. Actually, that's right where my controller is. Set this and mess around with it when you get into the radars. If you like the pie chart version of the radars, turn this off. If you would prefer to have a square radar where the bottom of the radar is spread out, you're still getting the mechanical functioning of the pie radar, but it is displayed as a square. They are functionally the same, but visually different. Mess around with it, find out what works best for you. I prefer the square. As we get into it, because using a controller and a keyboard setup, target cyclic switching of aircraft radar. This allows you to hit a button and actually pick the next target. Sometimes if you pick the wrong target, you gotta keep hitting it to cycle through it. Constant elevation of radar antenna. With this on, the radar antenna will always be pointed directly out the front of the airplane. When you're doing different maneuvers, that can adjust and move around. But if you're ever flying at high level or low level, and you want your radar to be aiming at a different flight level than what you're flying at, you're going to need to turn this off. This will be part of the settings when we actually get into the controls. I'll show you where to change this and actually be able to use it. Let's see. Most of the rest of this, I've left at default. Although I do want to get here to indicate its airspeed. I generally recommend putting this to at least IAS or TAS IAS. TAS is true airspeed. IAS is indicated airspeed. IAS is an actual measure of the speed of the air going over the wings. It can give you a better indication of if you might stall. So your airplane may be going 200 miles an hour, but for whatever reason, the air flowing over the wings is only moving at 100 or 70, and suddenly you're stalling and you don't know why. Let's see here. I think there's one, maybe two more settings, and then we're going to move on. Camera from aircraft gunner sight. I recommend turning this off. This will allow you to see when you are using a third-person gunner sight. When you're in the bomber gunners. I think I said that weird. It's okay, I'm not going to be editing. We'll see this. We'll figure this out. And mainly what I'm doing here, you can definitely mute me and look over these settings as you go through, especially with the controls. I'm going to make sure that I leave the controls on screen long enough for you to pause the video and write down or transfer those settings into your game, so you don't have to worry about someone scrolling through too quick, which is the problem that I've found most times, is that people put up their settings and then drop them very quickly because they're like, oh yeah, this thing. For helicopter battles, not a lot of people use helicopters nowadays unless you're doing ground battles. I like the PvE. I'm weird. I don't do it very often, but I do play the PvE. I do turn horizontal speed to yes. This is kind of the reverse of the last setting we were just talking about. This gives you only the horizontal speed of the helicopter, not counting vertical speed. It just seems to give me a better indication of what the helicopter itself is doing. Let's see here. Whoops, put that to yes. Let's touch on measurement units. This is a little bit of what you are used to and comfortable with. I'm American. I use mostly the Imperial system. But most of the documentation and videos that you watch on YouTube and other places all mention speed as kilometers per hour and distances as kilometers. Just straight up kilometers. I'm used to altitude being in feet, so even though a lot of distances and altitudes are set in kilometers, I need it in feet. Again, this is all flavor to taste. What works best for you? Play around with it. Use what you're comfortable with. We're going to quickly touch on chat and voice. I currently have my chat set to nothing. I stream. I don't want the toxicity of those chats in the on screen. Usually, I don't mind it. I can ignore the toxicity, but trust me, with it off, it seems to be a much more pleasant experience. For gamepad, I like vibration, but with vibration on, you'll use up your battery faster. And vibration with engine running, I turned that off pretty early because I didn't like feeling my controller constantly rumbling while my engine was running. The rest of this is all kind of not needed for the moment. You can look around through it and see what you like. Sound settings are kind of your personal preference. What do you like or don't like? And then voice chat. I do use voice chat, but not usually in game. Okay, so now here is the big one: controls. This is probably why you're here. I didn't go through and pick out all of the exact things that I've changed. So I'm mostly going to scroll through and mention a few things, but I do want to make sure that I'm scrolling slow enough that if someone wants to pause the video, they'll have a chance to do that. I'm going to go over a couple of my choices of why I've picked things, and most of my options that I picked are coming from a control scheme that is very close to default in some instances, that I've picked up from YouTuber Tim's Variety, and also some controls from, I believe it was Matt AWG. It might have been Defen. Okay, but they're all on PC, so they don't have those adjustments that work good for controls, for a controller. So let's see here. So setting up the roll and yaw axes. I have these on the controller for rolling and yaw and throttle, leaving just on pointer aim. Took a little bit of getting used to. This is why, even though I've had this game for a while, it took me a little while to actually get used to it. Let's see here. Thrust vector. I have that on Y and H. This is going to override a couple of options, but we'll get to that. We'll get around to those here in a sec. This one, and then I also have wing sweep on Y and H. And when you're setting these up, mess around with it, and don't be afraid to come in and do an invert axis. But also have these on relative control so that this will sweep in increments rather than all 100% one way or the other. Same thing for the vector control. This allows you to actually kind of set the distances of your wing sweep or your thrusters on something like a Harrier jet, and allow you to kind of decide on where you want that to be. And if you don't ever use it, that's fine. Switch wing sweep to 6. This is actually the button right above Y, so that those controls are all kind of in line. Flaps, leave that to the default on the controller. I also have it set to 4. I don't use that very often though. Flaps up and down, F and R. I'm just used to using F for flaps down, so R for up. Toggle air brake is always just on the controller, default. Reverse thrust, I haven't flown the Swedish airplanes. I don't really need it. So at the moment, Alt F. Toggle gear, used to it being on G, leave it on default, and add it to G on the keyboard. Drag shoot, don't usually deploy it by itself. If I do for some reason, I use the Alt G. I don't use this double controller button thing that I've tried to put here. Okay, weaponry. Now here's where things get interesting. The main ones that you're going to be using are primary weapon and secondary weapon. I have these on my right trigger and right bumper. When I do an example flight near the end here, using the different options here, primary will always be your guns, secondary will always be your missile or bombs or rockets. Jettison secondary weapon is Alt J. You generally don't need this unless you're playing in arcade, or for some reason you need to dump your bombs without them actually exploding so that you can start maneuvering if you're in a strike aircraft. Open bomb bay door I have on the end. You'll find that I have a few different options in the little rectangle of buttons that are usually above the directional pad that directly control the airplane. And we'll get to that in a sec, but the cockpit is on home, bomb bay is on end. Just makes sense to me. In theory, we have drop bomb, rocket salvo, air-to-air missile, all on the right bumper, but when you're using the switch secondary weapon, you don't really need it. especially if you have multiple different like air-to-ground missiles and bombs. You probably don't want to be shooting them all at the same time. Drop fuel tank, Alt D for drop. This allows you to drop your fuel tanks if you accidentally brought them or if you need to start maneuvering. Lock weapon for air-to-air, air-to-ground, and lock guided weapon. This is something I picked up from one of the YouTubers. YouTubers. They use space. I also like it on numpad 5. I have my hand already over on this side of the keyboard when I'm messing around with my radars, so I like having it there just in case I want to be able to adjust the lock of my weapon. Sometimes it locks a friendly. You don't want to lock a friendly. Hit num 5, it'll drop off. Switch primary and switch secondary. And secondary ripple quality. N and comma are super common for me. I like to fly strike fighters, so being able to set my bomb ripple quantity when I want it to, and then having to change between my air-to-air and air-ground is super easy by using this combination. Fire countermeasures I have on both the accent, I think that's what it is. It's right next to the one, right above tab, as well as left bumper. Being able to pop off countermeasures whenever I want became important enough that I put it on the controller. You're going to find that you want the controls that you're using a lot on the controller. Things that you're not using quite as much, you can move to the keyboard. For the recent addition of chairs of flares and chaff done separately, I have on page up and page down. Periodic countermeasures is on left control accent for something like an A10 that has hundreds of countermeasures. You can pop this off and they'll just keep going. Let's see here. Yaw and pitch for aimed weapons. I have these on the numpad. This allows you to use those manual control missiles. If you get good at it, by all means. I haven't really gotten good at it. Toggle laser designator, don't really use. Switch IR, radar, and IR-ST on and off. In an airplane where you're not using your radar, but it's sending out that searchlight and saying, here I am, numpad 0, and it goes away. I don't really use very many airplanes that have an IR-ST, so I don't use tab very often, but it's there. And we're going to get into the different search options for the radar now. Numpad 1, numpad 4, 2, and 3. Also set to numbers 1, 2, and 3. This is why I have my hand on the numpad a lot, is messing around with my radar. And when we look down here at horizontal radar queue, this is the arrow keys left and right. This is literally moving the radar dish left and right. Radar IRST tilt control moves the radar up and down. Like, so this is these controls are actually moving the radar, and then we have these options here that are allowing you to lock onto targets, to select the targets with a numpad delete, which is also the period on most numpads. 1, 2, 3, and 4. These 4 different options allow you to change the different options, with numpad 4 allowing you to switch to the air combat mode for most airplanes. Not all of them have it, but for the ones that do, tap this button and your airplane will want to lock up everything right in front of its nose. Let's see here, number pad minus and asterisk to turn on and off the ballistic computers. 8, 7, and 9. For airplanes that use the constantly calculated release points, this is the vertical green line on Vietnam era bombers or Vietnam era strike aircraft. Later aircraft use it as well, but it's not their only option. So you usually you don't find that you're going to use it very often. This allows you to set a target point that you pick, or to switch to the different bombing targets, not using number 8. This will pick the bases on an air battle. If you want to deactivate so that you can then drop your bombs at any point that you want, that's number 9. We also have sight stabilization on space. As you can see that we have that for a lot of things set on space. And they'd all just trigger. If you want to get rid of your sight stabilization, occasionally you want to, I have it set to C. Let's see here, gunner axis, leave those alone. Let's see, toggle view, leave that on Y. Don't use it a lot, but it's there. I have the view controls set to what I'm pretty sure is the default. Tracking enemy and tracking aiming axis. I have this on the left trigger. This is by default, and it allows you to do a padlock, which is, or at least that's what it's called in some games that I've played, where your pilot, or in this case the camera, will turn and point directly at your target that you pick by pressing A. That's in one of the common settings. We'll get to that in a sec. This allows the airplane to automatically bank and turn to try and put the guns on that target. It's not always perfect, but allows you a little more situational awareness that we don't have because we're not looking around using our mouse. Look down and look back, our default, along with the free access of viewing. It can be difficult to do this if you're not wanting to move your airplane but look around, but I leave it to default, you get used to it. Aerobatic smoke I don't use, but it's on L. Here's that open cockpit. It also closes the cockpit. Multifunction displays are currently on print screen, scroll lock, and pause. They're not really being used for anything else, might as well. Night vision is on insert. So now we've gone over all the things in the 6 or 9 block of keys that are usually all together. Let's see. And that's it. Oh, we also have toggle engine on I and toggle extinguisher on A. Most of this is all by default, although the toggle engine is something you don't usually have bound, don't usually need it. Occasionally it's fun to turn off your engine. I don't know why. I'm going to touch on helicopters, although I haven't gone through the settings as much as I have on the air battle, or the airplane settings. It's kind of default, it's kind of the same. Using machine guns and primary weapons and secondary weapons on the bumper. Weapon locks on space. Primary and secondary by B and N. Ripple quantity on period. I have set the radar up the same way. Not that you use it very often, but hey, you never know. Let's see here. Fire countermeasures set the same. The MAW is actually used on a few more helicopters, but it's set on this backslash. Let's see. I do have the views messed around with a little bit, because I find that you want to switch from third person to the gunner camera a lot more. I may do this more with my airplanes, but I found I haven't really needed it. I don't really switch cameras to the gunner cameras because you lose so much awareness and you tend to lose control of your airplane. And it's, with some of the settings that have been put in by Gaijin, leaving the ability to fly the airplane is more dangerous than targeting. I would rather miss and live than kill something and die. And yeah, most of this is set to the same. And kind of keep rolling through. Open cockpit, same button. Multifunction displays, print screen lock and pause, although there is a fourth one. I haven't set that yet. Don't know what to set it to. We'll figure it out. Night vision on insert. Okay, there we go. We're going to skip over ground and naval because I don't use ground and naval that much. I may do another one of these if I go through the settings and find a control scheme that works out. But let's jump to common. There's a couple of things in here that we want to adjust. Tactical menu, I'll leave that on B, but then also set it for the default of M on the keyboard. Having it right next to where I'm needing to change my bombs is super helpful. Statistics, leave it alone. J out is still there. You can actually put it on a button and eject if you ever need to. Whereas it's usually on the radial menu, or you have to just quit out the game. This makes it a little bit easier to do that. X-ray show vehicle modules. Occasionally it's fun to look at what's inside the airplane. Setting this on O. Lock target and is set to X as well, and A. This is super useful. I've also found that if you hold A and scroll your camera around a little bit, you'll actually be able to scroll what option or what target you're selecting a little bit. It smooths around, allowing you to pick which target you're trying to aim at, whether it be an air target or a ground target. Chat settings, enter, shift enter. Switching chat mode, push to talk is currently set to backspace. I don't use it very often, if ever. Let's see here. Most of this is all set to default. Zoom camera is on the X button and on Z. Don't use the Z very often, but it's on the controller because allowing you to zoom in using the left trigger and then pressing X to zoom in even more can get you pretty accurate on guns. At least on ground targets. Let's see here. Fix gun direction in mouse view. This is super helpful. This actually is, I think, the option that keeps the guns pointed at where you have your mouse target. Messing around with your aim sensitivity. I haven't done it. Just find out what works for you. If something doesn't feel sensitive enough, move it around. Zoom and hanger, not very useful, but I have it set to the number pad minus and plus. Team radio messages, I have set to T, and then 1 through 8, which is the default. I just use the radio menu if I ever need it. See, use gamepad for radio messages. And that's pretty much it. Everything else is pretty much set to default. I don't really use spectator because on an Xbox, it's a pain in the keister to do spectator camera. Don't use naval and ground, but I did go through these and set up the radars to match. Or at least I did originally. I may not have come back in and do it, or may not have come back in and done it. So these are more on the default settings that from what I've changed the current helicopter and airplane radars to. And you can also set your ground vehicle settings too. Setting up ground control through WASD, same for naval, can help you be moving and turning when sometimes your hand's already away from the controller. But again, we're here for helicopters and really mainly the airplanes. If you ever have any questions, send me a message. Try and catch me on twitch.tv, Alexander Sterling, AlexZander Sterling, Alexander Sterling, Alexander with a Z. I stream every Tuesday, and I'm trying to add in most Sundays too. Like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.